theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, I guess when you run out of fact witnesses, any old Watergate-era apparatchik will do, particularly one that, since his felony conviction, his time in prison, his disbarment, has turned his life around and become a good inside-the-beltway leftist. Talking about John Dean, of course.
He's on CNN all the time. He's a contributor.
No, I understand. John Dean and two U.S. attorneys who have nothing to do with the Mueller report and have no material knowledge of anything contained within it, appeared before the House Judiciary Committee to offer their interpretation of a public document. That's useful. Here's Doug Collins sort of making the point. I love your work on CNN, so why'd we all have to meet here? I can just turn on my TV.
But however, here we come with some folks that are great folks. You're wonderful on TV. I could catch your testimony on TV. In fact, by the way, I could this morning. I'm a Republican. I believe that you use everything that you've got to as much business as you want and generate as much as you want to work for yourself. But I don't believe it's the pro of this committee to have to come and hear from those who are not a part of the Mueller investigation, who are not a part of this, pontificating on things that you can do on TV like all of us get a chance to do occasionally, but not here on the hearing.
And I thought he had a fun little paraphrasing of President Obama's formulation in the direction of Mitt Romney for John Dean.
Just a few years ago, it was brought up, and one of our candidates talked about Russia being a threat, and the former president, Mr. Obama, said, that the 80s are asking for their foreign policy back. Well, guess what? This committee is now hearing from the 70s, and they want their star witness back. In fact, it's very difficult for one of the witnesses here today, for many of us who could actually trace the distrust in government back to the witness here today, the 70 star of obstruction.
Matt Gaetz, Republican from Florida on the House Judiciary Committee, had his turn as well. And he did a nice job reminding people that this isn't the first call for impeachment that one John Dean has made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a December 30th, 2005 essay written by Mr. John Dean entitled George W. Bush as the New Richard Nixon, both wiretapped illegally and impeachably.
Without objection.
Mr. Dean, how many American presidents have you accused of being Richard Nixon?
I actually wrote a book about Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney with the title Worse Than Watergate.
So it's sort of become a cottage. Did you make money on that book?
Laughing at himself.
It was a very successful book,
How much money did you make on it?
I'm sorry, I don't have any idea.
More than $1 million?
No.
More than $500,000?
I said I don't have any idea.
If you don't have any idea, how do you know you didn't make more than $1 million?
I don't really know exactly.
Doesn't know how much he makes from CNN.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Wait a second. Mr. Dean has made a cottage industry out of accusing presidents of acting like Richard Nixon. I would like to know how much money he makes based on making these accusations and exploiting them for his own economic benefit.
Yeah, I like that to know that too. That's a fair line of questioning. I mean, if you're going to have him here to testify with respect to a bunch of stuff he has no pertinent knowledge of, then why not get into it a little bit?
He was claiming there's a road, here's the roadmap to impeachment for President Trump. And I know because I was with Nixon. Please.
Yeah, I get it.
Didn't connect the dots.
I suppose. I don't know. I just have this feeling, by the way, that this show, and by the way, a KFC Stephen Cohn.
Oh, yeah. How's he doing?
He's finger looking good. And he conceded that it was part show.
Some critics say that this appearance is just a show. What do you say to that?
Well, it's not just a show, but for the part of it that it is a show, it's okay. The American public needs to be shown what was in the Mueller report. I think it's been said only 2% of the people read it, and I can understand that. It's not the most, it's not page-turner material.
Yeah, so a little show to help educate the public. Okay. All right. You know who I think the audience was for this?
What?
I think the audience was Nancy Pelosi. I think the audience was Nadler for Pelosi. The American public, you think they're compelled by what somebody that most people don't know or don't remember has to say about a report they're not interested enough to read. They got the top line. No collusion, and Mueller punted on obstruction, and now it's just a bunch of politicians arguing about it. For more on this topic and a few others, we're pleased to be joined by Jazz Shaw. He's the weekend editor at HotAir.com. Jazz, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, folks. Hope it's nice out there in Chicago today.
Yeah, it's lovely, except for, the fact that it's a totalitarian state. So what did you think about the performance of John Dean and House Judiciary Committee Republicans and just the whole circus?
The whole thing was just bizarre, wasn't it? I mean, it played out with the amount of mockery from a couple people, and you just played some clips from that it truly deserved. But I came away feeling a little bit slighted because why didn't they invite me? Because the witness's entire knowledge of this entire situation that's going on, is pretty much what he's heard on television. He had no involvement. Well, I watch CNN and the other networks every day. Yeah. I could have done the same thing.
Yeah,
right.
Where's my invitation? I'd like to write a book.
So what's next with this? I mean, who else are they going to call up there and try to lay out a roadmap to impeachment for President Trump?
Spiro Agnew is not available.
No.
Who else we got?
Let me see. Who was the lady who had accused Clarence Thomas during his confirmation?
Anita Hill. We got Anita Hill. She available?
Yeah, we could get Anita Hill in there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, spin the wheel, I suppose, right? Byron York writes about this in the Washington Examiner about the Democrats continuing to sort of be in God's little acre between the rock and the hard place on impeachment. And what's your sense about how much internal consternation there is between those who really want to press forward and worry about public opinion through the process, as opposed to those who want the ground to be a little bit more fertile before they do?
Well, Nancy Pelosi, for all you might wish to say about her and criticism you may have of her, she's been playing this game for a very long time. She was around, during the Nixon era. She's old enough to have seen it all come and go. So I think she is the one, and, mark this date for me saying this sentence out loud. I think Nancy Pelosi is the voice of reason in this discussion, not in terms of success or failure, but understanding the political consequences, knowing that if she gives in to the young socialists that are, really whipping up the crowd and saying we have to start impeachment now, and does that, it's going to fail. And when it fails, it's going to be a huge political failure, a spectacular failure. And the public, there's an exceedingly good chance that they're going to be like, well, why are you wasting our time doing this? Why aren't you doing your jobs? It very well could end up helping Donald Trump in the end, which is the last thing Nancy Pelosi wants to do. And so far, I thought she was going to cave by now. I really did. So I guess good for her. She's sticking to her guns.
Something that will benefit Trump, certainly, particularly if it plays out as advertised, is the deal he got done with Mexico for assistance with the migration problem at our southern border. Also included rescinding the threat to impose tariffs, which is good for the economies and thus the citizens of both countries. Despite what the New York Times, the New York Times' best efforts, this is a big political win for President Trump, particularly as you see material steps towards implementation already occurring.
Well, I don't know where you're getting your news from. That's certainly not what I heard on CNN and
right.
and the Washington Post and any of the late night comics. No, it was a huge win. They're grasping at straws here, trying to belittle the accomplishment by saying, well, these are things that Mexico agreed to, weeks or months ago. Well, they talked about it. They may have had some sort of start of an agreement, but they never actually did anything. And it was only when the president came along with the tariffs and actually set a deadline, it's like, hey, Monday, it's go time, that suddenly, the Thursday before, with 4 days to go, thousands of troops showed up on the border with Guatemala. Hundreds of members of a caravan were arrested and detained. Leaders of two migrant groups, migrant rights groups, were also detained. It was a mess. They mobilized their new National Guard unit, as they're calling it, different than our National Guard, and they're heading for the border. All that happened in a period of like 48 hours after Trump announced the deadline. So talking about it is one thing. It doesn't get you anywhere with the president. When you actually do all that stuff, well, suddenly, no tariffs. It was a negotiating tactic, and it worked. But nobody wants to admit that.
Yeah, which is so sad. But President Trump will today when he's in Iowa. He's also going to be there at the same time. Former Vice President Joe Biden is there. Is this a preview of things to come?
Well, that depends really on whether or not Joe Biden can secure the nomination. I've been watching, and yeah, he's the leader, no question. He's the front runner, has been since before he even got in. But in Iowa in particular, he does seem to be slipping. And there's a ton of people running against him. If a bunch of them start dropping out this summer and it all starts coalescing about somebody not named Joe Biden, he may not have this thing sewn up yet.
Yeah. And Elizabeth Warren, I mean, there's a virtual three-way tie right now between Elizabeth Warren and Sanders and Buttigieg. See, I butchered his name. Let's just call him Mayor Pete. Do you see him, rising in the polls as the summer goes on?
I said from the beginning that Buttigieg looked to me like somebody who, if he could get a breakaway moment and kind of capture the spotlight for himself, could be really dangerous. He has a lot going for him in terms of the liberals, people that are really motivated to vote in the primary. Yeah, he's one more white guy, but at least he's gay, so he's got the whole intersectionality thing going. And he's a good speaker, and he does, to his credit, have a good record in his hometown as mayor with a lot of the programs that he put in place. He helped the city recover. So he's got a good story. So, I think he has potential.
South Bend, they're right on the heels of Elkhart in terms of local regional GDP. I mean, that's a real credential running for president of the United States. I mean, this guy. I just can't believe this guy. I mean, it's amazing to me that he is taken as a serious presidential candidate, and I think it shows you why the CNN poll came out this week showing 54% of the population thinks Trump is going to win re-election, 41% of the likely electorate thinks he'll lose. And obviously, Trump's approval rating is in 54. It's not because I support him that he's at 54. The bump from where he actually is in terms of enthusiastic support to 54 is all a commentary on this the swarm of Democrats that was in Iowa this weekend.
Yeah, and sadly for the Democrats, and actually good for the rest of us, Biden is, I still maintain, their most electable candidate. But they're all busy trying to tear him down, and they're scoring points. They're bringing up a lot of stuff from his past, and Biden is kind of helping them, don't you think? Because by refusing to show up in California, by refusing to show up in Iowa until now, for all the big parties where they were all gathering, he was busy running around in Ohio and in some swing states and things like that, and not doing anything. And some of those early state primary voters, if you don't even bother to show up, if you just assume you've already got this in the bag, that might turn some of them off. So I don't know if Joe's totally helping himself.
Well, he said he had to go to his granddaughter's graduation, so he missed that Hall of Fame event in Iowa over the weekend.
Yeah, sure, and I think Hunter needed some help in the Eastern Bloc with some business interests, too. I mean, here, Joe Biden, I mean, not to culturally appropriate here, Joe Biden is a piñata. He is defenseless. He's just hanging by a string, and he's going to get beaten about the head and neck area until he breaks apart. I hope he's the nominee because I actually think he's the least electable of the candidates. But I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think he's going to make it out of Iowa, and then he's not going to make it out of New Hampshire. And somebody is, and it's not going to be Mayor Pete drinking booze out of a black paper bag with a couple of his quote-unquote homies that are probably paid extras. It's not going to be him in South Carolina. So I still think if she could get her act together, Kamala Harris is the inside straight in terms of the and you know, again, straight in the Democrat party, but the inside straight for Democrats in terms of the nominee. What do you think about that?
Well, You answered the question I was about to ask you. If you don't think it's Biden and you don't think it's Buttigieg, who's it going to be? I wouldn't rule out Kamala Harris, but I also think she's terrible on the stump.
Yeah.
I don't think she doesn't get people fired up. She's not as bad as Elizabeth Warren, who is just a total, anchor when she stands up and talks. But she's kind of in that territory. They need somebody more both relatable and exciting.
You know who they need? You know who they need back?
Here we go. Who do we need?
Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton. Let's bring her back. Let's wheel her back in like Hannibal Lecter and give her another shot to redeem herself.
I thought you were going to say Michelle Obama.
No. She's playing dodgeball on late night talk shows. She doesn't have time for this. He is Jazz Shaw, weekend editor at HotAir.com. Jazz, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. You have a great day.
Take care.
You too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer. Have you